drops gems, he's breaking it down. How the buy side spins, dollars around. Garrett steps up with that data finesse. Selling it right, no room for a guess. The mics are hot, the beats hit hard. Fans throw their hands high in the yard. Deals and impressions like a verbal sprint. Breaking it down with an Adtech tint. Adtech, Adtalk, it's a live Q&A. Buy side, sell side, clearing the way. CEO spitting truth, no delay. Chalice and Gemera owning the day. Programmatic flows in the scene real tight. RTB dreams lighten up the night. Adam says pivot, Garrett says scale. Together they weave one flawless tale. Adtech, Adtalk, it's a live Q&A. Buy side, sell side, clearing the way. CEO spitting truth, no delay. Chalice and Gemera owning the day. Yo, the crowd is back, the lights are dim.
In the Adtech justice system, the people are represented by two separate yet equally important groups. The sell side, who provide advertising opportunities, and the buy side, who find the right opportunities for advertisers. These are their stories.
Hey everyone!
Hey guys!
I'm gonna let the Law and Order keep going. Yeah! Welcome! I hope you're all here ready to enjoy Adtalk, where Adam and I are gonna decode everything that's going on in Adtech for you in 30 minutes because, you know, there's not that much going on this week or in Adtech in general. But we're so excited to have you here to join us. We can't wait to dig in, and don't be shy. Like, just reach out. Ask any question you want. We hopefully have at least 10 people this week and see it scale up from here. So go for it. Adam, happy to be here with you, buddy.
Yeah, awesome. Where's that music coming from? Are you getting that?
I still am. That's why I paused for the Law and Order.
Intro music. David Maldo, our producer from Do Video, did an awesome job on this set. Look how beautiful it is. We got everything. We got Chalice on the table. We got Gamera Turtles. We got our coffee, our mics, posters on the walls. And yeah, now the music stopped so I could stop bantering. So this is a crazy week in Adtech. You got Apple just got smacked down by a judge in their Epic case. And Google's in the remedies trial. And the Facebook antitrust trial just started. So who knew that here 4 months into the Trump administration that Adtech would be, that big tech would be in more trouble than ever before.
It's so crazy because I remember, I know in my career, like just being an ad tech, all of the companies you just listed were untouchable. It was like they were like stalwart, like nailed 50 feet deep into the ground. These are things that don't move. So if you want to do things, you do them around them, but you're not moving them. Like they're there. You can work with what they have, and that's your option. And it's crazy to see like the armor just slowly melting away from all of them. Maybe. We'll see.
Yeah. With the country so divisive, like this is something it started in the last Trump era, and then the Biden administration doubled down and had got, you know, all those trials going, and now the Trump administration, we saw the big tech leaders show up at inauguration, like looked ready to bribe their way out of trouble, and now so far it's not happening.
How's it
More
happening?
trouble
Yeah.
than ever.
More trouble than ever. Man, remedies too. Oh, I can't wait for remedies. I'm so
Yeah.
excited for remedies.
So, you know, if you're just tuning in, you don't know the story of that tech. It's not that we hate big tech or didn't enjoy working with them, at least sometimes, and that we don't respect what they've achieved. It's that our market hasn't been competitive, and we thrive on competition. It's best for the market if the best solutions win. Gareth and I are both entrepreneurs trying to bring proverbial better mousetrap to our market. And yeah, when the competitive dynamics are more fair, we're more likely to win. So, you know, it's nothing against big tech, but it's really a pro competition stance. That's where I'm coming from. Would you agree?
I would totally agree. I mean, a case in point, the way that my company integrates with people right now, there are only certain vendors that can support us, and Google is not one of them. Google simply cannot do what we need to do to deliver our product for our clients. And the fact of the matter is, there is one company that is integrated with every single publisher that we work with, and that's Google. So, like, if I wanted someone to have 100% compatibility with, it would be them, and I don't have it. And like that's unfortunate, right? That's a barrier. And
But I thought
their
also
market penetration with it. Yeah, go ahead.
what came up in Remedy's trial, this was, I think, a week ago today. DOJ proposed that Google separate the data that they collect from Chrome, I think Chrome and Android, from the search company, right? And Google was like, this was outrageous. The CEO got cross-examined about it, and he was called it like an extreme remedy. But as an AI guy, I'm like, this makes total sense. Like if AI is a bundle, then whoever has the most data has the best AI, right? It's like there's no competition around modeling on that data. And if they're separate, then whoever could make the best model from data, you know, that's available, you know, maybe you have to license it or pay or make sure that you're, you know, make that you're not going to do anything nefarious with it or that you'll respect privacy and all. But having some more than one business have access to the data in Chrome or Android means that the competition would move to what you do with that data. And I think that would be really good for America, right? We had the example of DeepSeek producing what seemed to be as good a model as ChatGPT, you know, because they were very, very scrappy and scraped the web and used ChatGPT. But it just shows these companies that are currently splitting the AI market aren't necessarily the best at it. They've just acquired the data, right? So having more competition and moving the competition to the modeling, I think the way to think about it is DOJ is suggesting these are two markets. And they did this before with Standard Oil. They said you can have all the oil, but you can't have all the oil and own all the refineries and gas stations. Those have to be separate markets, right? And they're kind of saying the same thing. Like data is like oil. And if you also refine the data, then there's no competition in the refining part.
It's such an interesting point because it also stunts progress so much to the benefit of the single company that has the two vertically integrated businesses. Like it really means that the only people who get to play in the big pond are the company that already has all the resources. And we see it in ads too, right? Like I'm sure the reason he freaked out at that is they use that data to power advertising strategies right now. They think it's a moat, and that makes their ads work better than other people's ads because they have this data that they're funneling in from ancillary businesses that are basically unrelated to the ads business. And yeah, it's amazing to think that they could be separate things where that giant treasure trove of Google's data could become a business unto itself. My gosh, everything would work so much better. Everything. It's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't seem that far away, right? They're already in trouble. It's already illegal that they lock down all the data from Android phones, iPhones, Chrome. Like that's already been declared like as anti-competitive. So it's just a question of what's going to be done about it. All right, I got an Adtech question for you coming out of the news. Magnite announced something. It didn't make much sense to me. Magnite has always owned, or not always, but for a while has owned the SpringServe ad server. And now they announced that they re-platformed it, or I don't know, they reframed their ownership of SpringServe ad server as a video platform. So what does this mean for you as a seller, ad tech seller? What does it mean for me as a buyer? What's the difference?
Yeah. So I'll couch my answer and I'm going to qualify my answer as I'm not a CTV guy. So I will probably say some things that are slightly incorrect, but I do know this history pretty well. So the history here is that SpringServe came along to Magnite as part of the SpotX acquisition. So Magnite, right, when they were doing their great CTV rollup, which was a wonderful corporate development effort that was brilliant. And remember, the stock price jumped to $65. Like the street bought the Magnite CTV play. They bought it. They were like, oh, this company is going to corner the CTV market like they were cornering frozen concentrated orange juice in trading places. And like, so
Clarence Beeks.
Clarence Beeks. But basically, SpotX was a strategic investor in SpringServe. So Magnite, as part of the SpotX deal, acquired the ability to acquire SpringServe. SpringServe was started by Joe and Matt Dearborn and a bunch of other guys who are old school well, Joe has been running ad networks since I think he was 15 years old, like performance ad networks. He's awesome. And it's like I first got to Joe Hirsch. I first got to know them when he ran a company called Yellowhammer Media Group, which is an early Right Media and AppNexus ad network. Yellowhammer, which I think is the state bird of Alabama. He's going to get some out of me. Yeah.
Sort of be.
Yeah. So basically, SpringServe started out as a video ad server. So if you think about the video ad serving space, there was a huge boom in video ad serving, vast ad serving. So video ad supported or ad template, something like that. And which was Ari Papero's project. And LiveRail. Ari gets his credit. We get to, and you know what? It's credit and blame. I blame him for Vast, and it's not a good thing. But so the history here is that there was this proliferation of video ad servers. And there was LiveRail, there was LKQD Liquid. LiveRail got bought by Facebook for $300 million, was 100% written down, is single-handedly responsible for Facebook souring on Adtech. There was Liquid, which I think got bought by Nexstar. And there were a few other ones, right? All of these, essentially video arbitrage ad servers. And the reason that there were video arbitrage ad servers is the way that video still works to this day is when a video ad is serving, it loads up this vast template, it tries to serve the ad, and it might not succeed. There's something called a vast error, where for whatever reason, the ad doesn't render, and then it calls someone else. So it calls another vast tag that's somewhere else in the waterfall. So that's what SpringServe did. SpringServe's a great system that optimizes those waterfalls. And I think the thesis here, and the reason that they've integrated the two systems, is that they can say that, okay, now our video ad exchange, right? So the actual auctioning thing that works with DSPs is natively integrated with that system that manages the vast tags. They are now one system.
So
the reason that's yeah. What was that?
So it won't fail so much, they could say, the bid's coming from Magnite and the ad will serve?
Yeah, I think it's control. I think it has to do with the fact the main benefit for them is now anyone who uses the SpringServe ad server, I'm sure is somehow more natively integrated with the Magnite ad exchange. So as their waterfall is executing where they're calling all these exchanges, Magnite gets to be really, really smart and saying, oh, we're willing to pay this much for this ad impression. Therefore, you should send it to our exchange. And what it looks a lot like, which you're going to love, is dynamic allocation.
Yeah.
So the thesis here is very similar to the GAM AdX thesis. And actually, GAM and AdX were performing precisely the activity of integrating the concept of GAM with AdX just on a much longer time scale. It takes them years because they're Google. But there have been a bunch of steps that Google has been doing the same thing that Magnite and SpringServe did, which include UPRs, right? Universal price rules. They included doing away with the concept of standalone AdX. So you couldn't, and Magnite did the same thing. It's so funny, the parallels direct. I can't pop out a Magnite CTV tag anymore. That just calls the Magnite CTV exchange. I pop out a SpringServe tag, and the SpringServe tag calls the exchange. Same thing with GAM and AdX. I can't get an AdX ad tag. I used to be able to. This used to be a thing. I've trafficked them myself. I could get an ad tag that just calls AdX. Can't do it anymore. I've got to get a Google Ad Manager ad server tag, and that will now call AdX. So there's precedent here because the integration of the two, right, creates
It's bundling, right?
benefits. It's bundling. It is 100%. And the bundling is less powerful for Magnite because Magnite can't, like, they don't have the market heft to go out and be like, you don't get the Magnite exchange unless you use our ad server. But there are certainly other benefits besides the tying and the fees. Like there's control, there's optimization, there's all that stuff.
Yeah, it just feels like trying to create a network again. Like it's over and over. People have taken OpenRTB and said, this would be more efficient if it was more like an ad network, and then things were bundled together.
I posted my article today, and the rumination at the beginning of my article holds true, which is if you gave me enough people or enough agents, I'm pretty sure we could do all of Adtech in one Google Ad Manager account. I think we could do it. Just spitting out tags over here, setting up line items over here. The structure is the same. Like every ad server is a little like ad ecosystem unto itself. So yeah, that's why we keep seeing the same thing over and over again. We're like, wait, this is an ad server, it's an exchange. Like, what's the difference? What's going on here? So wait until they have their DSP, and the Magnite DSP is bidding from the Magnite exchange into the Magnite ad server, and it's all the same things.
It doesn't have to be that way. So read Gareth Hates Adtech. Today's edition breaks down the DSP SSP functions and how they've moved. It's really good simplification of the functions in Adtech, and makes clear that all this bundling doesn't have to happen. Like you can cut right to extremely efficient mechanisms for transacting, right? Like Trade Desk, OpenPath, which maybe we'll talk about today or another time. But history was just made. We got the first question from someone calling themselves ZZ. And again, I think you should take this first. This is, what are your unfiltered thoughts on ID bridging?
So well, there are caveats for ID bridging. The caveat is there exist fields where ID bridging is allowed. So the fields where ID bridging is allowed. So let's take a step back. I'm going to get really technical for a second, but I'll try and explain it quickly. The way that OpenRTB works, the way that Adtech works, is every ad opportunity is represented by a bid request. Within a bid request, there are a set of fields. The fields are the website that it's on. They're the IP address of the user. They're things like that. And a subset of those fields are for user IDs. And there are two different types of fields for user IDs. There are something called EIDs in an ext object, and that's where you can basically put whatever you want. And ID bridging into EIDs, where it's like perfectly fine for them to be probabilistic, basically it's fine for them to be made up to the extent that people care about them, is okay. Where it gets naughty and where I think it is flat out fraud is when you put a bridged ID into the buyer UID field. So buyer UID is the field that is supposed to be my DSP and your ad exchange have talked. We know my DSP ID 123 is your ad exchange ID 456. And if you put ID 456 into that buyer UID field, it better be ID 456. It is supposed to mean that you have access to the user's browser and it's ID 456. And if you bridge there and you say, well, we didn't access the browser, but these guys did, and they think it's 456 because we've done a thing with them, so I'm going to send 456 in buyer UID, that's fraud. I think that that's unacceptable. So yes, those are my unfiltered. I think it is literally criminal fraud. Like it should be. It's insane that we would ever allow it.
From the buy side, like optimization, if there is signal, if there is sales signal, then optimization will take care of this, right? You would see this ID didn't convert, wouldn't you?
Well, that's where this gets really hairy. Is what if? So the scenario I just described, right? Ugly buyer UID ID bridging, where I don't have access to the user's browser. I don't know if it's 456.
Oh,
but my buddy over here
says
says
my match table saying this is Gareth. Is it because that's what I was thinking. Is that I would take the wrong information into my user graph?
So actually, normally on a bridged ID, if it's probabilistic, right? There's a chance that the graphs line up and everything works out, but there's a chance that it doesn't. And the fact is, unfortunately, because of the way that ID syncing works, is a percentage of a time it doesn't work even when it's done properly. And that is the Trojan horse that ID ridging rode in on. It is, well, 10% of the time this doesn't work anyway. So we get a 10% slush fund to make up IDs. But really smart ID bridgers will ID bridge when they think it's going to convert for an advertiser. So they can send a fake ID for a user that is not actually the user, but they want it to get bought because they think it's going to work, and it could look like it works. It's possible. And that's still bad. Still bad. It might work, but it's still bad. It's working for a bad reason. It should be an EID, and that should be taken care of that way.
All right, but that's a crack there, right? Like if the seller has knowledge that the buyer in DSP doesn't have, like there's a real problem here. I agree with you that it's fraudulent, but there is a problem that sellers often are trying to give DSP signal that DSPs can't process and use, right? Yeah. So there's a possible scenario where the seller knows this person is in market for Adidas, yes, right? And you should buy it. And if they do buy it and it converts, then the seller sort of did the buyer a favor, right, at helping them get around their DSP's rigidity. So,
oh my gosh, I'm so happy because this got me to my question for you today, Adam. And this is exactly what I wanted to talk to you about, because in my mind, right, the right way to do that is always EIDs. It's always like, okay, we have a designated field for this. We have extension IDs. And if you know that they're in market, you can map this ID over. And theoretically, DSPs should optimize to that, right? If they see, oh, this EID, when it comes in this field, correlates to outcomes for my buyer. That should be a thing. But I don't think it is. And I think that's why we end up in these games.
That's not where the friction happens, because DSPs don't limit how many IDs you could upload into them and say, this is part of my audience, right? And the better DSPs even will let you score huge sets of IDs or even every ID, right? That's not what they limit. So if the situation is like I described, Gareth is in market for Adidas, I don't need a special buy-side signal for that, as long as you do have an ID. Now, if you're in Safari, if you're using Safari and there is no ID, then there might be a reason, right? Because uploading your ID into the DSP isn't going to help me. So the question becomes, how does the publisher saying, oh, I know this is Gareth, but he's using Safari, get that information to the buyer in a useful way? And I think that's where we start to run into limitations, right? You, as Gamma, as a sell-side tech, might try to help the seller signal that. And as we found trying to work together, we run into all kinds of problems saying, all right, Gareth has a signal, it's in market for sneakers. Gamma has a signal of in market for sneakers. You're going to put it in this field, try to get the SSP to surface it, try to let the DSP let us bid according to it. And it's a mess. It's really hard.
Yeah, it's crazy how inflexible they are. That was part of one of the things I tried to cover in my most recent article, is like kind of why this is happening is DSPs just have this very strict framework in how they operate. And even when I go in and I look at DSP algorithms and I look at the signals that DSP algorithms use, the list is not long. Yep. And it's like a very high level, somewhat limited list. And now user ID is almost always in there, which makes me my governing thesis is that DSPs are user ID buying machines. And I know I'm not alone in thinking that. A lot of people think, oh, the modern iteration of the DSP is it's just a user ID buying machine. It's not actually good at anything else. It just buys lists. That's what it does. But I would say, what is in these, so for Chalice, when do people come to you needing custom algorithms? What are the limitations that buyers actually run into that DSPs would build them in this way? Where when I look at this, I have a DSP that doesn't even take deal into account. So if I'm sending valuable signals in my deal and the buyer doesn't break them out, then it's not going to treat my deal, the signals through my deal, the sites in my deal, any differently than any of the other buyers, which is just or other sellers. It's crazy. It means that I'm adding no value, and the DSP won't optimize to my deal, and it won't do anything because it doesn't think about deal. So it's just awful.
Yeah.
So please.
I'll hit on those. There are some big ones, and then let's take the question first.
Yeah.
The industry's obsession with measurable KPIs, sometimes leading to a neglect of brand building and long-term impact in favor of short-term conversions. That's a
Ooh,
buy-side question, so I guess I'll go
that's
first.
a buy-side question, please.
There's nothing wrong with short-term conversions, right? I think that is the real pressure on most enterprises, right? And I don't think, I definitely sympathize with where Bluehawk is coming from, being like, oh, this is so annoying, like they're chasing their tail and they're not thinking about building their brand. It's like they probably are, and unless you have reason to believe they're having an awareness problem, that argument doesn't really hold water unless you really have data saying, Mercedes kids don't. I was on the Mercedes team for a while, and we were able to show data that showed that young people didn't have the same respect for Mercedes as older people. Or say like you really have an awareness problem that you haven't reached the youth with your core message, and that's different. But if someone is just interested in short-term sales, I would recommend focus not on that they should be brand building, but that insisting that the KPI is measurable and they usually mean attributable is a huge mistake, right? It's left over from when digital was so small that it was necessary to attribute sales to digital. Now digital is half the market. It's hundreds of millions. If you're driving more sales, they'll see it in the bottom line, right? Or you could run a digital test in one state of a national brand and see the results in the bottom line. So the obsession of attributing it to impressions is a little crazy, especially when the two biggest outlets, Facebook and YouTube, don't let you attribute impressions yourself, right? They'll only attribute their own. So it becomes this trap. Or if you want things attributed, you have to spend the money with them and trust their algorithm. It's crazy. It'd be better to make your own audience of who you're going to prospect. And if it works, you'll see that in the bottom line. Like we think you should deploy that audience wherever it makes sense. So actually this dovetails into your question. Like what are the things that the regular system, the rigid DSP system of attributing results is really bad at? So store sales comes right to mind. They're terrible at store sales, right? The platform's built for e-commerce. They don't react to the nuances of physical inventory of like, is there any of the item in the store? Is the ad near enough to a store that someone's going to buy it? Which stores are doing well and which are poorly? They're terrible at all that. And everyone at store sales should try to get away from that, right? I think car sales is right behind that as another case where the DSP algorithm is probably not doing what you need to do. Incremental conversions, right? The bigger the brand, the more organic conversions they get. And the DSP algorithm is really bad at discerning an incremental customer from a non-incremental customer, right? It's an ID machine, but it's the incremental customer might be solvable by an ID, but they don't take it, right? They treat every ID that's going to buy as the same. And if it's someone who shops at Walmart every week, sending them Walmart ads makes absolutely no difference, right? They just shouldn't do it. But the attribution system will say, this is working, you're getting great ROI. Those are, I'll give you one more big one. In finance, there's something called adverse selection, meaning a lot of people who are trying to get credit shouldn't get credit, right? So digital advertising always drives a lot of adverse selection, partly because DSP algorithms are cheapskates. They always look to drive cheap conversions, right? And someone who's looking for quality is another person those algorithms don't really serve. So if you do run a lot of cheap impressions, you get a lot of adverse selection, right? The machine needs a better way to predict the value to a banker or an insurer. That's just not in those algorithms, right? And the quality of the website is probably a really good indicator, right? So the whole problem with the quality of the website is that they're limited to domain. All the DSPs, all the major DSPs go on domain instead of page. And some domains have tons of pages of varying quality. They all do, in fact, because they make more money if they vary the quality deeper in the pages and make worse pages that monetize better. That's their incentive currently, and it makes the market pretty treacherous for buyers. Is there another question? All right. Oh, it's Kara. Hi, Kara. Take it, Gareth. Are there data sets that are more difficult to bridge? Have found that certain types of data perform better and wonder if that's a coincidence.
So bridge in terms of ID bridging.
Yeah, less fraud. Other data sets with less fraud.
Yeah. So the nature of ID bridging is such that the root of it, what's actually happening here, is one system is telling another system that this user is this person. So anytime you're buying against behavioral data, anytime you've uploaded a list of IDs to a buying system, you are vulnerable to ID bridging. Because what that system is going to do is it's going to say, hey, this bid request is coming in. It has this ID in it. Is that ID in my list? The reason ID bridging is so dangerous is because the ID that is sent in that bid request is sourced kind of illegitimately. So defending yourself against that is really, really hard because like you can't control how ad exchanges are sourcing and sending through their IDs. So any behavioral data, yeah, go ahead.
If your audience is custom, that should be safer, right? They're not looking up the in-market and Experian. It might help.
I mean, so where this gets really, kind of scary, and so putting I am now an ID bridger hat on. I have my ID bridge hat on. I get a percentage of the transaction when the ID is bridged because a lot of ad exchanges themselves do ID bridging. What I'm going to do is I'm going to monitor which user IDs you buy. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to say they really like user ID 123. That's their favorite. They spend $10 on it every time. So what I'm going to do, and I'm going to be like, okay, someone tell me that this user is ID 123. Someone tell me that. I don't care how or why. I don't know if it's user 123 or not. Someone tell me. And once we're in the world of probabilities, someone can say, well, the probability exists that this is user 123. It's possible. And so basically, they'll send it because they think you're going to buy it. And the way to defend against it, and the way that all DSPs have to defend against it, is they have to do deterministic ID resolution, and they have to come in and they have to say, oh, we just did ID resolution on this. There's a mismatch. You said it's 123. It's not. That's in the buyer UID field. You're not getting paid, and I'm not charging my buyer. That's how this goes away, by the way. Like that's the fix.
Do our friends at LiveRamp prevent this? If we do everything on LiveRamp IDs, are we safe?
If the ramp IDs are coming in via the client, well, here's the thing. Ramp IDs are also probabilistic.
Yeah, I mean, not counting that.
Okay, not counting out their email address to IP address mapping that they do. Yeah, if it's a deterministic ID and it's coming in from the client, it's clean. You're safe. You just want to make sure that that's what it is. Like you have to trust the company.
They have the authenticated and the you could choose the authenticated and the probabilistic.
There you go. Exactly. If
this episode is brought to you by LiveRamp.
I mean, hey, it's sold for a lot of money for a reason. So, but I would say that one, I mean, the data set that I traffic in has nothing to do with user IDs. The data set that Adam was just talking about has nothing to do with user IDs, right? Like a priori page level assessments. So any data that's not built around behavioral data is inherently shielded from ID bridging. You're safe from it. And you just have to be careful how much you trust these IDs. And I do think that maybe this is a report DSPs should issue. I wonder if that's a thing. ID mismatch. How often was there a mismatch between the ID you thought you were buying and then what we detected when we were there? Like how much did that happen? Well,
yeah,
that should be available in logs.
We could find that, but I still didn't get the answer to the question. If let's say let's say Gareth, your ID is a good one. Someone fakes your ID, I buy it, and then the real you converts. Will that attribute properly, or when you convert?
Depends on the system. So does the DSP store for that impression the detected ID or the declared ID? If they store the declared ID and then I convert post view, it's going to do it wrong. Like it will be a thing. It will be broken. But if they store the detected ID and then I convert post view, they'll be fine because they won't tie the two things together. Post click, you're generally safe.
They don't load your cookie on a view, do they? They have to use the one that was sent.
No, they do. No, I mean, they load cookies in ad views. That's the thing.
Even if they're not serving the ad?
I would assume so. Anyone who's doing post view attribution as a service will load an impression pixel on a rendered ad.
Yeah, that's where they catch the mismatch right there.
They should. I don't know why they don't.
Let's make it happen. I would guess that Trade Desk polices this and keeps it to themselves. That's not your experience?
Out of the numbers higher than anyone would like to talk about. This is something that we just quietly ignore. We're 15-20%. Not matching.
They let it go.
Yeah, we're not going to mention this unless anybody asks about it. And if they
actually, when
Adtalytics
Adtalytics blew up that company Colossus for allegedly doing this, and now they're in court over it. I think the Adtalytics story said Trade Desk knew about this, and it did eventually shut them down, but they didn't shut them down immediately.
Yeah, and the way that Colossus was caught was a little strange. It's because this is very hard to detect in the client. It's a very difficult thing to do. But I think they did basically what I said, which is they looked for the Trade Desk ID and they tried to match it to what was declared going out to the best of their ability. But yeah, that's exactly what this was. And like I said too, the other problem is that there is an expectation that some of this always exists. And Kara asked, changes certain log files make this harder to spot. Yeah, definitely. I mean, in some DSP logs, like they're loath to give you user IDs. Like, does DV360 give you user ID in the log?
No.
Yeah, they don't. So you can never catch this in DV360. Wouldn't be possible. Wild.
But as a buy-side guy, don't you hear stories of people getting in trouble for this and getting shut down by Google or Trade Desk or Amazon? Like, you would think at least one of them would be like, fuck this, and shut them down. No.
Colossus is the only one that I've ever heard who got dinged for this.
And you think they just went too far?
I think Christoph kind of did them in. Like, it's one of those things. It's just like with MFA, right? Except in MFA, it was something that someone could objectively evaluate. But the first MFA states to die were the ones that got singled out by Chris Kane. It wasn't like all of them died at once. It was, at first it was darts. And like Chris Kane would post an article, that MFA side would get nailed and turned off everywhere. I think that Christoph threw a dart, hit Colossus, and the incentives are just very perverse on this because DSPs want to deliver their budgets. That's the problem here, is they want to spend all of the money on this list of user IDs, and decreasing the number of user IDs that they can deliver against in their pool is not necessarily in their interest.
Oh, grim. Yeah, and poor Christoph got sued and is now in court over it. So I think, yeah, the incentive to call it out if you're going to get sued makes it even harder.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I do generally trust people like the Trade Desk to go, we're just going to stop buying from you. I'm just going to let them do that quietly. Like, let them make these adjudications internally and have them expose their logs so people can help police this. And I actually trust them decently well to do this. Google, you don't have user IDs in the logs. Like,
who knows? Yeah, it's whatever.
Who knows, man?
Well, you were talking about indirect. It brought up a question. Remember, I asked you, people should hear the answer to this. We ran all ads.txt seller types for a very big client and found like indirect performed pretty well. And I asked you, how could this be? Indirect, first of all, indirect being cheaper. That's the first question I asked you. How could indirect be cheaper? If it's being sold twice, there should be two markups. How is indirect cheaper? And remember what you told me and what to look for that we did eventually find.
Yeah, and there are a few things in there. There's placement level analyses that you can do to try and find it. But the nature of the ecosystems right now is they're still fragmented. There's still weird stuff out there. And I'm always yelling at publishers because I'll be on a publisher site and their outstream unit will have no fill and it'll load a banner. And I just know that banner wasn't in their central pre-bid auction. which means that banner that's loading in the AdStream unit, which is not a good place for a banner to load. That is a hideous ad experience. It's terrible, but it's going to be really cheap, super cheap. And going back to the optimization that we were talking about before, that DSPs do, if DSPs are optimizing at the site level, they're going to go, well, I bought this banner in the little AdStream unit from this reseller for pennies. The ROAS is amazing. This is the best supply path to buy from. This is the good one. And like, it's crazy.
Yeah, you told me to go look at the GPID level, and we found that there were GPIDs that were only from these indirect sellers. So what is that again? You're like, it's like not a real ad unit. It's something that some SSP is squeezing in on a page.
Yeah, I mean, there are a few different weird ways you can do it. So there are widgets that are ad units that are outside the publisher's flow. Even more hideous is sometimes some exchanges run secondary auctions. This is a good ad fraud one for you. This is you poor buy side people, you don't know that this happens. Someone will buy an ad on a publisher website and then refresh it every 5 seconds. So let's say the ad is in view for 30 seconds. The arbitrageur can now turn one ad into 6 ads, which means that they can pay the publisher a very pretty penny to buy that ad slot. And even if all of the refreshes are way cheaper than what they bought the initial one for, they're going to still make money because their arbitrage is, can I refresh this to make more money than I paid for it? And once again, if you're just looking for ROAS, those refreshed ads are wonderful. Like, because viewability is a really low bar. 1 second in view is a really low bar. And like, and so you could very, very easily squeeze a bunch of viewable ads in there. And if the DSP algorithm is like, well, did the viewable ad result in a conversion? If so, ROAS number is this. The reseller is going to look great.
Well, Chalice is through this one. We're collecting refresh rates from currently tens of millions, soon to be up to 100 million full URLs. And we even have a histogram of refresh rates across a huge swath of inventory so people can see how many are below like the human level, like you say, 1 or 2 seconds. And we first set the threshold at 40, and now we've moved it down to 30. We feel a site that refreshing 30 seconds might be okay.
30 is fair. So just so you know, the historical minimums for this, 30 is the historical min. So the rule used to be, and this changed, but the rule used to be AdX is a minute, and or AdSense is a minute, AdX is 30 seconds. So basically, programmatic demand is 30 seconds. The hardcore performance demand is a minute.
What's the logic?
Well, I think their ad network did the math. And we're like, for their post-click performance campaigns, anything faster than a minute doesn't convert. So if it's faster than a minute, we're not buying it. You can sell it to these other schmucks, but we're not buying it.
That's incredible. All right, should we call it? Let's
call it, man. 40 minutes is good.
Leave some for next week.
Yeah, great questions today. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming.
Thanks for everyone who tuned in. Hopefully, we answered your questions. If not, come next week. The recording is going to YouTube and maybe some. David, we ready to go to some podcasts with this week? So we got to wait for that.
Yeah, we'll ship them out to iTunes. Let the Apple people enjoy them.
Spotify,
sure. Why not? Let's do it.
We had a Spotify request. Somebody asked for that.
Yeah. All right. Cool.
Right on.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys. See you next week.
See you next week. Some applause.